For the past half hour, he had been observing his attractive wife as she navigated her way through the ballroom. Her intention was to position herself as far away from her husband as possible when the ball dropped at midnight. She was surrounded by well-off and self-satisfied peers, acting like an elaborate dish served for everyone's attention. Executives from his workplace would kiss and touch her, particularly his obnoxious boss who had been born wealthy. He was well aware of this routine, as his company's New Year's Eve parties had followed the same pattern for the past 2 years. During the first year, he had tolerated it, chalking it up to the effects of too much champagne. However, last year, the reality hit him hard, and he started making preparations to address the situation. Feeling a tug on his coat, he turned around to face Deirdre, Josephine's closest friend and co-conspirator. "Happy New Year, Mike," she exclaimed, reaching up to give him a somewhat pitiful kiss, an annual gesture. Their lips barely grazed before he pulled away and looked into her brown eyes. Deirdre was another socialite, coming from a wealthier family than Josephine, and just like his wife, she was part of the upper echelon. Normally, he expected to see her usual self-assured smirk, implying that she held some secret knowledge he didn't possess due to her high social status. But this time, he saw 2 new emotions on her face: pity and concern. "Mike, don't take this so seriously," she said soothingly. "She's just engaging in the custom of exchanging kisses on New Year's. She'll come back to you shortly without any harm done. She'll remind you how much she loves you." He gave her a doubtful look. Deirdre attempted to offer him reassurance. "She truly loves you, you know. It's just that she's very outgoing, lively and impulsive, whereas you tend to be more intellectual and reserved. Sometimes she needs a chance to be around people who share her nature. However, being with them only reinforces her love for you." "All right, Deirdre. Is that why she spent the entire Christmas party hanging out with her co-workers under the mistletoe?" "We attend her Christmas party, and she spends the night dancing and being affectionate with her colleagues. Then, here at my company's New Year's Eve event, she spends the whole night dancing and kissing, though not with my firm's executives. So, by being intimate with everyone at the party except me, she's supposed to somehow gain a new appreciation for me. It's an interesting theory. Let me ask you, is this her annual tradition of giving George the imbecile a dozen kisses, or is it her way of showing love for me by doing something she knows I detest?" Gotta hand it to Deirdre. She managed to look embarrassed. She couldn't meet my gaze, so she averted her eyes and tried to continue. "Mike, I understand you're upset, but you have to try to see it from her perspective, don't you?" "Deirdre, I think I might actually understand. Perhaps for the first time in our 5-year marriage." I turned away from her, went back to our table, reached into a briefcase I'd placed there earlier, and pulled out a rather large, brightly wrapped gift. I turned away from her, took off the ring from my finger, and placed it in the center of the bow. This would make her remove the ring to open the gift. Facing Deirdre, I extended the package to her. "I'm going to head out now. Please give this to your friend when she's finally able to break free from the crowd around her. Let her know I wish her a happy New Year, and I hope she finds everything she deserves in the upcoming year." I began to leave, but Deirdre grabbed my arm. "Don't leave, Mike. I'll go fetch her. She's had too much champagne again. You need to take her home." "No, Deirdre, I don't have to. She has a room reserved here in the hotel. She's been here all day entertaining the men while I've been working. Of course. You're aware of all this because you've been here with her. She has her own car, clothes, and everything she needs. I'm pretty sure at least one of the guys she's spending time with right now will be more than willing to accommodate her. Or maybe all of them will. Don't give me that look. You fed me the same line last year when I gave her another chance. She's made her choice. And so have I. Goodbye, Deirdre. I have to admit it'll be a relief for me to never have to see you again." Walking out of the ballroom, I gave a nod to Helen, the HR director. I had spent the first half of the day with her while my boss and his buddies were busy setting things up at the hotel. To be honest, he was actually in a fancy suite, which he paid for using the company credit card. Sleeping with my wife, that is. I should correct myself, though. They were actually sleeping in the luxury suite. My wife and I have evidence in the form of photos and videos to prove it. Helen also has some of this evidence, and the chairman of the board will be informed about it very soon. After leaving the ballroom, Helen and her husband moved toward the group of men surrounding Josephine. Deirdre was also navigating her way through this group of men, some of whom persisted in attempting to kiss her as part of the tradition. A few men tried to flirt with Helen, but her husband's disapproving expression, a former American soccer forward, seemed to discourage them. Helen made her way through the crowd until she reached CEO George Burke and his companion, who were just ahead of Deirdre. A few feet away from them, she paused with her husband and observed Deirdre's puzzled expression. Then, the sound of Deirdre's name being called out sharply caught Jo's attention, causing her to break away from George's embrace. Upon noticing her friend's surprised look, Deirdre frowned. Helen, on the other hand, smiled. Deirdre held out a beautifully wrapped gift and said something to Jo, who accepted the package. She leaned in closer, appearing to ask Deirdre to repeat what she had just said. "Mike left this for you." "He's gone, Jo," Deirdre told her friend. "He watched you flirt and make out all night, and when you started making out with all those men, he gave me that package and left." Jo grinned. "Oh, you know Mike. He gets all worked up when I don't pay attention to him for a little while. I'll go home, say sorry, give him a good time in bed, and everything will be back to normal. He loves me. Even when he's mad, he leaves me a gift. Let's see what it is." Deirdre tried to interject. "Jo, I don't think it's a present." But Jo was already busy untying the ribbon to open the package. As the ring fell out and hit the floor, there was a pause. Jo looked puzzled and asked, "What's this?" George, who had been watching, bent down, picked up the ring, and extended it toward her with a smirk. "Isn't that your husband's wedding ring?" Jo stopped unwrapping the gift, stared at him, perplexed, and took the ring. She glanced at Deirdre, who quietly muttered, "I tried to tell you." Undeterred, Jo continued tearing off the wrapping from the present, revealing a white gift box inside. Feeling relieved, she smiled, gave the box a little shake, remarked on its weight, and began to peel off the tape on each side using her fingernail. As the tape on the third side came off, the contents of the box spilled out, scattering across the floor. She crouched down to gather the glossy sheets that had fallen. Others also squatted to help pick up the ones that had slid away. All of a sudden, everyone came to a halt. Jo's eyes widened and she shouted, "No!" Her cry grabbed the attention of those nearby, and more people gathered around them. Deirdre's eyes also widened in disbelief. She looked up and saw the horror-struck expression on George's face. He picked up a large glossy color photograph measuring 20 x 30 centimeters from the ground, placed it against his expensive suit, and involuntarily yelled, "What the heck, Jo?" He said it loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Everyone's attention turned to the scattered pictures, which depicted Jo engaging in sexual activities with people other than her husband. There were numerous images of Jo with George, as well as Jo alongside other executives from the company where Mike and Jo worked, including her colleagues and bosses. While the pictures didn't cover every position, Mike had carefully chosen ones that clearly showed Josephine engaging in shocking activities with both men and women in various combinations and quantities. Confronted with these graphic photos of her sexual escapades, Jo fainted. She fell onto her back, and George's shoe prevented her head from hitting the tile floor, potentially causing a concussion. Deirdre knelt down next to her, lifted her head, lightly slapped her face, and urgently shouted, "Jo! Jo, are you okay? Talk to me, Jo." As both women lay on the floor, others began picking up the pictures and examining them. A woman turned and struck her husband with all her might just as he was looking at the picture he held. "You're a cheater," she exclaimed. "No wonder you don't have the energy left to satisfy me." He stared at her in shock, and then she swung her purse, landing a punch on his right eye. He grimaced in pain and then crumbled to the floor when she kicked him in the groin with her pointed shoe. The woman knelt down and systematically went through the pictures scattered on the ground. She paused, glanced up, and declared, "You ladies who are married to the higher-ups at Taylor & Son might want to check out some of these photos. There are images of other husbands in here as well. If you're looking to save on divorce attorneys, give me a call, and we can explore a group rate." 9 other women knelt down, joining her in examining the photos, causing the men to back away. "There are also flash drives here," one of them announced loudly. "Who knows what's on them?" A woman directed her anger at a well-dressed older man, shouting, "You dirty cheater! Remember our prenup? You're financially ruined, you jerk!" The man tried to explain, saying, "Baby, I'm sorry. It didn't mean anything. She kept coming on to me and eventually I gave in. But it happened only once. And she wasn't as good as you anyway. You're lying, liar!" the blonde woman shouted, holding out 2 more pictures. The blonde woman stood up from the floor, her eyes filled with anger, and she confronted him, waving the pictures and unleashing a string of profanities. He stepped back, turned, and fled. Meanwhile, the other woman sobbed, clutching her chest with one hand and holding a photograph with the other. Her husband, hiding his face in his hands, was also in tears. The man took out a photo, holding it up to the attractive woman standing in front of him, and exclaimed loudly, "So you're bisexual? What the heck is this? You kept telling me there would never be a three because you wouldn't be with another woman." She blushed, turned around, and hurried away, struggling in her 10-inch heels. Another woman chose several photos from the pile and began calling out names as she headed toward the center of the ballroom. The puzzled woman stopped her, picked up a photo, stared at it, and turned to her husband with a furious expression. He started to back away and she quickly moved toward him, waving the photograph. This situation repeated 5 more times, with each victim's friends also being hit in their ears and eyes. Note: the original text included asterisks here, which I replaced with explanatory text. Jo was already awake, observing the chaos around her with dazed eyes. A man in an elegant tuxedo knelt beside her and inquired, "Are you okay?" She looked at him with curiosity and nodded. He asked, "Who are you? Can I help you?" She responded solemnly, "I'm Josephine Lord, but I don't believe anyone can assist me at this point." "Are you Josephine Reynolds Lord?" he asked in disbelief. She nodded and inquired, "Yes, I am. And who are you?" The man handed her the stack of papers he was carrying, took a photo of her with his phone, and loudly declared, "I am the bailiff. You've been served." Josephine Reynolds Lord. These documents, along with the accompanying photos and videos, substantiate the cheating claimed in Michael Morris Lord's divorce petition. He turned toward the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't had a chance to review the photos, you can simply request a copy of the divorce papers, which are public records accessible online. They list the names of all the individuals Joe W.B. has engaged in sexual activity with over the past year, along with when and where. For a small fee, I can provide a link to Joe QB's website, which comprehensively details her actions since January 1st of the previous year. If you wish to examine this information to determine whether your spouse has been involved in intimate relationships with SHB and SUMS or more, you can contact me via Cheating Spouse Pycomb. For an additional fee, I'll provide a link to our site. I can supply digital copies of the participants' actions. This evidence will prove invaluable in court. I anticipate your response." He bowed deeply and walked away, leaving behind a trail of tears, fear, and panic. He might face consequences for this act in the future, but he was compensated handsomely for it. Plus, being in New York and having his office in New Jersey, where his influential family held sway, offered him a sense of security. Jo still had the divorce papers in her lap, resting in her friend's arms, her mouth open in confusion. She glanced at the faces around her, seeing a mix of hatred, pity, anger, and unease. The usual mixture of admiration, desire, and jealousy that she had experienced throughout her privileged life was conspicuously absent. The full weight of her loss and shame hit her, and she held on to Deirdre tightly, burying her face in her friend's chest, sobbing uncontrollably. George Taylor instructed his subordinates to gather the incriminating pictures and destroy them. Looking directly at Helen, he commanded, "I want a reprimand letter for Mike Lord on my desk by Monday, with the termination papers underneath." Helen responded with a neutral expression. "I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor, but Mr. Lord resigned this afternoon. He provided 2 weeks' notice, utilized the vacation time you approved last week, packed up all his belongings and left the building." Mr. Taylor's response was firm. "I won't accept his resignation. I'll fire him after giving him a reprimand. He won't find work in this industry again." "However," Helen continued, "I apologize again, Mr. Taylor, but he spoke to the chairman of the board before leaving. Your father accepted his resignation. Mr. Lord has already secured another position with a firm he previously consulted for. With your written approval, sir." Taylor's face was so red that people around were worried he might have a stroke. He was angrily swearing at his father and Mike Lord. Helen and her husband found this situation amusing, holding hands and enjoying the embarrassment. They didn't show their amusement on their faces, though. Mike Lord drove from New York in a new 4-wheel drive Chevy High Country Suburban with a big turbo diesel engine. He had ordered this special engine in addition to the regular features. He ordered the SUV in the fall as soon as the new models were available and received it yesterday. According to the GPS, it would take around 24 hours and 32 minutes to reach his new home in Austin, Texas, using the route he chose. However, he knew it would likely take him almost a week, because he planned to experience and learn about the culture of the rural states he would be passing through. When he reached Virginia, he planned to avoid the main highways and take the scenic country roads mentioned in John Denver's songs. He also wanted to explore the small towns in the Carolinas that Mary Chapin Carpenter sang about. He was excited to try the local homemade jellies and jams sold at small stores along the roadside. He intended to eat where the locals did, away from the busy highways and the lifestyle he had grown tired of. Mike and his wife had separate checking and savings accounts, but this changed after he bought his SUV. Because she had earned 10 times more money than him during their marriage, buying an $88,000 car wouldn't really balance things out. Still, he was fine using some of her money to purchase it. As per his proposal, he would keep his investments and retirement funds, and she would hold on to hers. If she agreed to his generous terms and signed the divorce papers within 10 days, he wouldn't make any claims on her penthouse or trust fund. The car's radio was set to play the best classic country music on Sirius XM station called The Roadhouse. Joe disliked country music almost as much as he disliked retro music, so he'd switched to the classic vinyl station next. He was his own person now, no longer the uninformed husband she had portrayed him as for the last couple of years. When the New Year's ball dropped the previous year, he had taken control of his life and spent the entire year organizing his thoughts. Perhaps Taylor & Son, the company he used to be part of, would survive after he left, but he didn't believe it would do well. Operating under George's poor leadership and lacking the design improvements and patents he had contributed over the last 5 years, he anticipated it would collapse within a year or two. He found satisfaction in this idea, knowing that his efforts had driven more than half of the new sales and profits in the previous year. He also had top-notch designs and improvements ready to implement as soon as his new company became operational. Oh, his former boss, who is now the head of the board, and George's father, Randolph Taylor, would likely sell the company before it failed. However, George would be revealed as the incapable fraud he truly was before that point. The idea of that made him happy. Tonight, he had successfully portrayed George and his own unfaithful wife as immoral members of society with no principles. In the next year, when his new company outperformed his old one, he would expose George's lack of business skills, just like squashing a bug on a windshield. Thinking about this brought a smile to his face. He didn't mind being a fly on the wall, observing when Josephine's parents learned about his actions at the ball. Helen had already called him to share the positive outcome. The fact that she had spread the photos all over the ballroom was even better than he had hoped. Although he had intentionally designed the box to fall apart when the film was cut on 3 sides. Her parents had always looked down on him, and they were disappointed when their precious daughter decided to marry him. They thought he wasn't good enough, especially because he didn't have an Ivy League education. The reality that his engineering degree from the Colorado School of Mines and master's degree from the University of Michigan made him highly sought after in his field mattered more than an arts degree from Brown University. With a smile, he thought about the chaos he had caused and the achievements he would create in the future. Deirdre and her husband Albert drove Josephine back home right after they entered the house, and she took a look around. Joe began crying again. During the ride home, she practiced what she would say to Mike. She needed to clarify that her affairs didn't mean much to her and weren't damaging their marriage. She wanted to explain that these were like a break or an effort to influence decisions that affected both her and Mike, aiming to improve their lives. She tried to justify that casual sexual encounters actually helped them. They helped her manage her strong sexual desire and also taught her things. She used to please her husband to add variety to their intimate life. It sounded ridiculous, even to herself, and she was fully aware that Mike wouldn't believe it. The truth was he was very committed to their marriage vows. Even discussing the idea of swapping partners or engaging in role play with others angered him. So why did she think he would accept the excuses she was planning to give? Deep down, she understood that her marriage was falling apart. However, when she entered their apartment and saw that all of his belongings were gone, she realized she had fallen into a pit she had created herself. She collapsed to the floor, crying and feeling bitter, blaming her own arrogance. She couldn't easily explain her actions because she never thought she would get caught. And if by some chance she did, she believed she could convince her kind, innocent husband to forgive her. For 3 years, she had been successful in hiding her actions. But tonight, he destroyed both their marriage and her reputation completely. The week went by swiftly for Mike. He copied his SIM card before throwing away the old one in the slushy city snow. This way he could reach out without any interruptions while traveling through the Old South on his way to his new home in Texas. He sent his custom emails throughout the week. Each spouse received a personalized email with an attachment, causing marriage after marriage to fall apart. The thought of this outcome brought a grin to Mike's face. He had mailed the letter to Deirdre's husband just yesterday. Mike felt a sense of satisfaction thinking about how Al might react. Although Jo was accountable for her actions, it was Deirdre's account of the pleasure she found in her affairs, along with her friends' encouragement to share the enjoyment by being promiscuous, that truly influenced Jo's decision. On the fourth day, back in New York, Deirdre and Jo sat on the couch in their apartment. Now it was just their apartment, as Al had kicked Deirdre out after receiving an email containing a video. The video included snippets of sexual activities and a revealing conversation between Jo and Deirdre, where they described their conquests and pleasures and listed the names of their lovers. They even laughed about their unsuspecting husbands. Albert forwarded this conversation to the wives of the women mentioned, especially if he knew them, which was often the case. The turmoil was spreading and Albert found satisfaction as he watched it unfold. Things weren't any better for George either. His father had fired him and cut him off from his inheritance. In fact, his father had also fired all the top executives who were responsible for the company's negative reputation due to their actions. His father was now acting as the CEO, while his new vice president of talent development and attraction, Helen, was recruiting skilled executives from around the world. As he drove past, Mike skipped the Martin Luther King Boulevard exit and got ready to make a turn onto Cesar Chavez Street. He drove by the Austin Convention Center and noticed Lady Bird Lake on his left. He crossed Congress Avenue and parked at the exclusive high-rise apartment that his new company had arranged for him. He had paid 6 months' rent in advance for the apartment, which was on the 70th floor, and offered a view of the rainy city. This gave him time to search for the kind of house he had always wanted, complete with trees and a lawn. Once he was settled, he planned to get a dog and start looking for a reliable partner who would enjoy building a life with him and their children. His new business partners had already organized a barbecue event where they would introduce him as recently divorced, ensuring there would be plenty of eligible women there. Meanwhile, in New York City, the ongoing drama continued as exposed spouses implicated others and abusive partners shared information about other abusive partners. Helen kept Mike updated about the situation. He thought about the spreading chaos caused by the fire he had ignited in New York and couldn't help but smile. The more he learned, the more excited he became about his decision to move to Texas. He thought about it with a sense of finality, repeating, "Gone to Texas." My wife is a strong supporter of feminism and places great importance on her independence. This has influenced our married life, making it more like two independent individuals living together rather than a traditional married couple. She devotes a significant amount of her time to her work and personal projects, both at her job and in our home, which creates a dynamic environment. As a result, my role often feels more like that of a roommate rather than a typical spouse. I'm a 35-year-old guy who got married to a software developer 2 years ago. I have a career in accounting, which doesn't demand as much of my time and effort as my wife's job does. She has a strong desire to prove herself and out-earn me, which leads her to continuously take on various projects. After we got married, she began to view household tasks as a test of her pride and started expecting me to handle most of the domestic responsibilities. Due to her work commitments, my wife is often away from home during dinner hours. She prefers either eating at her workplace or getting food delivered online. As a result, we mainly spend time together on weekends. She intentionally keeps her distance from her married cousins and friends who have embraced the roles of homemakers and mothers. She prioritizes her independent lifestyle over that. I've noticed that at social gatherings, she tends to make negative comments about housewives, referring to them as servants in private conversations. I consistently tried to have open conversations with her, encouraging her to avoid making fun of women who chose different paths in life. However, she remained firm in her stance, stating that she couldn't picture herself living without a career, seeing it as a sign of failure. She took a lot of pride in her job and career, and sometimes it came off as arrogance, which often frustrated me. Despite that, I have to admit she treated me well and showed kindness to me almost every day. She'd express her love with gifts and affectionate texts throughout the day, filled with, "I love you," and "I'd miss you." Her caring and consideration towards me were impressive, and I was content with our romantic life. In the bedroom, she took the lead to make sure I was happy. Recently, one of her cousins visited our town, and it was the first time they had seen each other since childhood. So we hosted a dinner to create a warm family gathering. My wife had certain expectations about her cousin, assuming she'd be a stay-at-home mom or someone facing career challenges. But to her surprise, her cousin had become a successful dentist with a stable income. This unexpected news bruised my wife's pride, as she was used to bragging about her own achievements. She couldn't help but feel jealous of anyone who had achieved more success. To try and compete with her accomplished cousin, my wife took on an extra job during the weekends, aiming to achieve greater success and wealth within our family. As a result, we didn't have much time together. One of her colleagues, Rob, from her new job, would frequently come over to our place to work together on coding and programming tasks. They were actively involved in working on important personal projects and planned to launch them soon. Since there was a significant age gap between Rob, my wife, and me, I never felt threatened by his presence at our home. Actually, Rob and I would sometimes play some games together during their breaks, and he would even cook delicious meals for us, being in his 20s. Unlike me, Rob wasn't burdened with marriage or a lot of responsibilities. He was fully focused on their project and work. It was clear that he was actively dating, frequently changing girlfriends, and exploring various relationships. Because of our experience in relationships, my wife and I often found ourselves giving Rob advice in that area. On nights when they had to work late, Rob would stay over in our guest room. My wife made the choice to leave her full-time job to fully commit herself to the significant project she was collaborating on with Rob. They both put their hearts into their work, working extremely hard to make their ambitious project a reality. Being someone who values hard work, I fully supported my wife and Rob in their efforts. My wife had a strict attitude when it came to their work. If Rob ever seemed lazy, she would show her displeasure and make a big deal out of it. She emphasized that this project was her most important accomplishment, and she wouldn't tolerate any mistakes or shortcuts in how it was done. To keep things peaceful and prevent Rob from getting scared or leaving, I often found myself trying to mediate between my wife and him during their arguments. Knowing that my wife had a tendency to get angry, I made an effort to take Rob's side in order to calm her down. I needed to make sure their collaboration continued smoothly, especially when we were with our friends and family. My wife took a lot of pride in her new projects and loved to show off about them, proudly talking about her achievements to others. But, because of her excessive pride and arrogance, our old friends and family slowly stopped inviting us to events and get-togethers in response to this behavior. Rob stepped up and organized small picnics and even treated us to concert tickets, giving us chances to relax and take a break from our demanding work schedules. Our social circle got smaller, including just me, my wife, Rob, and whichever woman Rob was dating at the time. Despite having fewer people around, we found happiness in each other's company. My wife always had this ongoing need to compete with Rob's girlfriends. She was convinced that her unique blend of beauty and intelligence made her better than them. She always took every chance to show off her qualities. Sometimes, I would get really frustrated with my wife's self-centered behavior. During a big argument between us, Rob was the one who stepped in to calm things down and mend our relationship. He played a role in trying to make peace between us and bring back harmony. Over time, Rob had become like a younger brother to me, and I had complete trust in him. I even offered him the option to move in with us, but he declined politely, understanding that we needed some space. He was already spending most days and nights at our place. My wife and Rob were working hard on a project that was almost done, and their efforts were starting to pay off. They worked tirelessly on their laptops, coding and programming day and night, taking on more work as the pressure increased. My wife's irritability grew worse. She often directed her frustration at Rob, yelling and letting out her anger on him. Surprisingly, she never once complained to me about her workload. On the other hand, Rob had to deal with her bad moods and manage his own substantial workload at the same time. Seeing this, I couldn't help but feel sorry for him as he navigated through the challenges of the project while dealing with my wife's unpredictable temper. One evening, I ended up going to my company's annual dinner by myself since my wife was busy with work while I was getting ready for the event. Rob, who was also busy with their project, kept making comments about my tie choices. After a while, I settled on a red tie and said my goodbyes. When I got to the dinner venue before our boss, I couldn't help but see that everyone else was wearing blue or gray ties. It was quite different from my red one. To my surprise, they told me that the tie color was actually part of a planned theme, and they had talked about it in a WhatsApp group that I didn't catch. As I looked at my red tie, wondering if I should change it, I started to feel bored. The event hadn't started yet, and there was still some time before dinner, so I spontaneously decided to go back home and switch my tie. I was curious about Rob's reaction and wanted to playfully interact with him. I thought it would be fun to surprise him with a different tie when I got back. As I unlocked the door and walked into the house, I was surprised to find that the room where Rob and my wife had been working was empty. They were nowhere in sight. I suspected that Rob and my wife might have argued, leading him to leave and her going to our bedroom. With this thought, I went into our bedroom to change my tie. But what I walked in on completely shocked me. I was utterly dismayed to find Rob and my wife in a highly intimate situation on our own bed, without any clothes on. What I saw was way beyond anything I could have imagined, and it was deeply disturbing and disgusting to witness. Both Rob and my wife were taken by surprise and filled with horror when they saw me unexpectedly entering the house. They had wrongly assumed that I would be gone for several more hours and took advantage of that. A mix of anger and despair surged through me, making my temples throb with the rush of blood. I ignored them and quickly headed toward the room where they used to work together. My intentions were hidden in a cloud of intense emotions. Fueled by anger, I swiftly found their laptops before they could react and forcefully threw them against the wall. The laptops, which held years of their hard work, broke into pieces on impact. Then, I deliberately chose to take the broken laptops outside, making sure they couldn't be salvaged or fixed. Thankfully, their USB drives were connected to the laptops at the time, so they had no way to recover or store their important data in their state of desperation. They begged me to stop, their uncontrollable sobs showing how devastated they were by their lost efforts. My wife tried to explain that their actions were a result of exhaustion and stress from work. However, instead of calming my anger, it actually made it worse. I was overwhelmed by shock and the feeling of being betrayed, so I had to make the difficult decision to forcefully kick both my wife and Rob out of our home. Discovering their intimate connection, despite my wife treating Rob like a little brother, and the lack of any previous signs, deepened my feelings of pain and betrayal. I never thought something like this could happen to me. I let everyone know about my wife's actions, which greatly distressed her. She's always cared about her image among her peers, and because of this, she fell into a state of depression. The project she had dedicated years to was ruined, and her professional partnership with Rob came to an end. She's now relying on medication to manage her state of mind and finding it hard to complete her work due to her unstable mental condition. Her workload has significantly decreased, and she can't maintain a full-time job. In an email, she expressed her apologies. She feels an immense sense of guilt for the failure of her dream project, and believes she's solely responsible for her shortcomings, which has some truth to it. However, when I served her with divorce papers, she didn't react well. Struggling to come to terms with the situation, she finds it very tough to handle failure in her career, marriage, and other parts of her life. This makes it difficult for her to keep going. The setbacks she's faced have taken away her pride. Some might argue that the danger of pride is its potential to lead to one's downfall if arrogance persists. It can make it hard to connect with a higher power or grasp the essence of spirituality. When someone is consumed by pride, they tend to adopt a condescending attitude toward others, which hinders their ability to see beyond their own point of view. As for my decision to divorce and move forward, I found comfort in that choice. Both my ex-spouse and my old friends are now reaching out and offering their support. They've come to realize the hurtful behavior my wife displayed toward them, which had led them to exclude us from their gatherings before. Since parting ways with my wife, I've regained the backing of my friends. Engaging in activities like camping and hunting has revitalized my spirit and lifted the depression I used to feel. My wife used to foster competition between me and my friends, but now I'm free from that mindset. I no longer feel the need to pursue wealth just to outshine or dominate my companions. Let me give you some background. Let's call her Sue, not her real name. We met at a friend's engagement party, and man, she was stunning. Blonde hair, tall, skinny, and beautiful. Plus, she had a killer sense of humor, and we hit it off at the party. We started dating, and I knew from the start that she was the one I wanted to be with forever. I popped the question and asked her to move in with me, but she hesitated. I figured maybe she wanted to keep her independence, which I respected. Most of the time, I ended up staying at her place since I had a house in the suburbs that I almost paid off, and she lived in the city. It was convenient, and I didn't mind spending nights at her apartment instead of driving back home. She was a nurse, so sometimes I had to stay alone in her place when she had late shifts. So at first, she wasn't ready to move in with me, because she didn't want to give up certain privileges. You see, she didn't have a car, and getting around would have been really tough for her. She actually wanted me to move into her place, but I'd already pretty much paid off my house's mortgage, so that wasn't an option. Plus, her apartment was too small for both of us. Then, COVID happened, and everything changed. Because of the lockdown, she decided to move in with me. She worked as an essential worker, so she was out most of the time, while I had the luxury of working from home as a software engineer. Because of the pandemic, we had to put our wedding plans on hold. To make things even more complicated, my dad had flown in to be with us for the wedding, but he got stuck here. Luckily, he didn't have to go to work, so he ended up leasing Sue's empty apartment since she wasn't ready to let it go yet. You know, it's important to mention that my dad and I weren't really close back then, but we were okay with each other. He left my mom and me when I was still a teenager, just so he could be with his secretary, who happened to be just 6 years older than me. It hurt at first, but I eventually got over the resentment since he didn't skimp on child support. He just wasn't interested in being a part of my life. While I was in college, my mom passed away, and he actually showed up at her funeral. He said he would still take care of my needs and that I didn't have to leave my stepfather if I didn't want to. My stepfather was fine with me staying, and my dad continued to pay for my expenses until I finished college. We would meet up whenever he flew in, usually for dinner or lunch. But most of the time, he was with different women who seemed to be around my age, or even younger. I didn't really like it, but I also didn't care that much. I figured it was none of my business, you know? Oh, and by the way, he wasn't married or in any committed relationship during this time. So let me start by giving you some background on my relationship with my dad, before I continue with the story. When the lockdown restrictions were lifted, Sue made a big decision. She wanted to quit her job and make a career change into tech because she was burned out with her current work. I was making a good 6-figure salary, so I could easily cover both of our living expenses without any issues. I wanted to help her out, so I offered to cover her living costs while she paid for her classes herself. She moved in with me, and I even set up a workspace for her right next to mine so she could attend her classes while being close to me. We spent a lot of time together, and sometimes we'd even have my dad over for dinner. Interestingly, my dad decided he liked staying in the same city as me and had no plans of leaving again. It was cool with me because he wasn't getting in the way of my life. Later, I found out the reason was that he had a new girlfriend he was pretty serious about. To give you some background, my dad is a wealthy guy. He inherited some major shares from his parents and waited until his late 40s to sell them, and they were worth a ton of money. He also had a high-paying executive job in a big multinational company, so he was making a lot. Once I settled into my new lifestyle, I got a promotion at work. Even though I still got to work from home mostly, I had to go to the office sometimes. But no matter what, I was always happy to come back home to be with Sue. We were pretty intimate and having a lot of fun during our free time. Sue started feeling restless being at home all the time, so after we talked it over, she decided to get a part-time job back at her old workplace as a temp nurse. The good thing was that she didn't have to take as many shifts, but she was getting paid better than before. She also eased up on her online classes, but after about 3 months of working again, she started complaining about being too tired, and she really looked exhausted too. I tried to help her by giving massages when I could and suggesting she take some time off work to rest, but she said she couldn't because there was nobody to cover her shifts. I didn't push it and let it be. Then she started coming home with expensive stuff she bought, but I wasn't suspicious because she loved shopping and had always sacrificed to buy designer clothes and shoes before we got engaged. I thought she could afford it since she didn't have to worry about living expenses. Gradually, She started taking more and more shifts until her schedule was just as busy as before. We hardly had time together, as her days off and my work days didn't match, and she'd leave for work while I was still asleep and come home just before I went to bed. Despite all that, we still found time to be intimate. About 6 months after she started working, we began planning our wedding. She reduced her workload, saying it would allow us to focus more on the wedding planning. I didn't have any issues with that and supported her plans. I was too swamped with work to be deeply involved in the wedding preparations, but I trusted her decisions. So one night, she comes home and drops a bombshell. She's pregnant. I couldn't contain my excitement. I went all out, buying her a bunch of stuff and treating her to a dinner with my dad and his new girlfriend, who were just as thrilled as I was. Sue decided to quit her job to be a stay-at-home mom, and I supported her decision completely. By then, I had already finished paying off the mortgage and was in a great financial position to provide for my family. Life was going well. I'd come home from work, and Sue would fill me in on her day and all the wedding preparations she was making. I noticed that my dad was spending a lot of time with her, in a good way. It seemed like they were getting along great. What I didn't realize was that she was keeping things from me. When the phone bill arrived, I noticed she was constantly on the phone with him, exchanging lots of texts back and forth. Turns out, they were covering their tracks and I had no idea. Now that I know what was going on between them, I feel incredibly dumb and angry. I got suspicious when Sue kept coming home with shopping bags from fancy stores. It didn't make sense since she wasn't working anymore, and she wasn't using my money either. When I asked her how she afforded all those things, she gave me vague answers that set off my BS detector. So I decided to do some snooping. Once she realized I was suspicious, she stopped bringing new stuff home. But I noticed her with new bags and shoes I hadn't seen before, which made me realize she was still buying expensive things. I couldn't take it anymore and checked her purse, where I found a receipt from her recent shopping trip. Shockingly, it had my father's name on it as the buyer of those things. When she came home, I confronted her about the receipt, and she said my dad needed help buying a gift for his girlfriend, and she gave him advice. As a thank you, he got her those expensive things from the store. Her explanation kinda made sense, but something felt off. There's no way my dad would drop $5,000 on my fiancé just for helping him pick a gift. I started connecting the dots and realized that my fiancé and dad were finding a way to be together almost every day. He was spending more time with Sue than with his own girlfriend. I didn't have concrete evidence, but I was pretty sure something fishy was going on between them. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. First, I sneaked a GPS tracker into Sue's car to see where she went, and I secretly set up cameras all around the house. In the first week, I didn't catch anything unusual. She went to the doctor's and the supermarket, pretty normal stuff. But I knew it was just a matter of time before they slipped up. I finally got the chance I was waiting for when Sue left her phone at home while running to the store. I knew her password, but I never snooped around without a good reason. But this time, I found out she had changed it. I returned the phone, acting all normal, and decided to wait and observe for another week to see if I could figure out the new password. Finally, I got it, and I waited for the perfect moment to get a hold of her phone. That moment came when she left her phone on the coffee table and went to take a bath. I checked her messaging app, but there was nothing useful there. So, I decided to go through her social media apps, and that's when I hit the jackpot on WhatsApp. She had been deleting her chats with him, so I didn't find much there. But what I did find shocked me to the core. She had sent him explicit pictures of herself just earlier that evening, with a message saying, "All yours, Daddy." My father hadn't replied yet, but it was enough to confirm my worst fear. My own dad and my fiancé were having an affair behind my back. The next couple of days were a living nightmare for me. I couldn't handle it anymore, so I decided to take a break from work and go camping to clear my head. But the night before I was supposed to leave, I saw Sue's phone lying around again, and an idea struck me. I installed an app on her phone to spy on her messages in real time and set it up to get notifications whenever she used WhatsApp. Then I packed my things and headed to a city hotel where I drowned my sorrows in alcohol all day. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover but a bit of clarity. If I wanted to confront this situation, I needed solid evidence. I kept a close eye on her messages in real time and saw that she had texted my father almost right after I left the house. After a couple of hours, I watched through the cameras I'd set up and saw my dad's car pull into my driveway. And there it was, the heartbreaking scene. My soon-to-be ex-fiancée welcomed him with a hug and a kiss. She was even wearing the lingerie set I had bought for her on Valentine's Day, the one she hadn't even worn in front of me, but she put it on for my father. I couldn't just let it slide. Both of them needed to face the consequences of betraying me. I secretly recorded their affair and kept the file hidden on my cloud, making sure Sue had no reason to check so she wouldn't know I was on to her and my father. I decided to stop drinking and started plotting my revenge. We still had 3 months until our planned wedding date, but I had to end things before then because I couldn't imagine marrying her again. After my break, I went back home on the 3rd day as planned. There was no trace of my father, as if he had never been there. Sue greeted me warmly and tried to initiate intimacy, but I turned her down. Just being in the same room with her disgusted me. That night, while she slept, I stared at her, wondering how she could lie to my face so easily, and why. I looked around the room and noticed new things, stuff I wouldn't have seen if I wasn't paying attention. There was a new winter coat she couldn't have afforded on her own, and I figured my father must have gotten it for her. As I watched her sleep, I had dark thoughts of wrapping my hands around her neck. The temptation was strong. I dug into her other messages and found out she had been talking to 3 other rich older guys before my dad got involved. When I checked her phone, I found videos of her doing sexual stuff with those men. The last time she had contacted them was before she moved in with me. Now it was clear that she didn't want to move in with me initially, so she could have the time and privacy to sleep with these guys. This discovery explained why she took on extra shifts and why she rushed to go back to work after retiring. It also made sense why she kept bringing home expensive purchases. The sad part was that I had always bought her costly gifts, hoping she'd stop starving herself because I knew how much she liked nice things. I took screenshots of all the messages and printed them out, keeping the videos I found hidden along with the one of her with my dad. The first step of her revenge plan was to become financially dependent on me. I pretended to have a change of heart, telling her I'd pay more attention to her and the baby. I made sure to cover almost everything she wanted, trying to make her feel secure. I'd go out and surprise her with things I knew she liked, while also telling her to stop spending her own money and just ask me. She agreed, being the greedy person she was. I wondered what she told my father, but after that, she stopped bringing new stuff home. I convinced my dad to buy a new apartment in the city so he could spend quality time with his girlfriend, who was also clueless about his cheating. My dad even said he was going to propose to her, and I pretended to be happy because it added a new twist to my plans. While I was spending more time with Sue, she still found moments to text my father and meet up with him. I could see everything happening in real time, but I didn't say anything. At that point, I wasn't even heartbroken anymore. I just wanted to put them through hell for what they did to me. My dad got a new apartment and moved out of Sue's place. I convinced her to sell the apartment and invest the money for the long term. I suggested she buy some crypto, but it was a shaky coin that might go belly up soon. Surprisingly, she agreed, and I helped her with the whole process. Taking control of her finances, I discovered that she was almost completely broke. Apparently, instead of getting money from her sugar daddies, she only received gifts. And since she stopped working, she had no income at all. I kept gathering evidence leading up to the wedding. My dad asked if he could propose to his real girlfriend during the rehearsal dinner, and I reluctantly agreed. The printouts of their conversations had piled up, forming a thick book's worth of evidence. I went to a guy who ran a publishing company and asked him to turn the printout into small books, making around 30 copies. That way, I could give them out at the wedding rehearsal, and there would be enough for everyone attending, including Sue's family and friends. I compiled everything into the book, which I titled Sugar Baby Sue. I was sure it would make a big impact. I spoke with the wedding planner and arranged to include the book in the gift bags for everyone at the rehearsal dinner. The wedding planner read the book and got all flustered. I warned her not to say anything to my soon-to-be ex-fiancé if she didn't want to lose her bonus. I also asked her to cancel all the wedding bookings since it wasn't happening and to keep things low-key. Thankfully, I managed to get my money back from some of the vendors we had hired for the wedding. I created a video montage from all the videos I had and added special effects to make it more impactful. I sat down with my father's girlfriend and spilled the beans about everything that had been happening between the man she loved and the woman I loved. She was devastated and wanted to break up with him right away, but I pleaded with her to wait until I had completed my revenge. During the wedding rehearsal, when my father took the microphone and started talking about marriage and how Sue and I would be a perfect couple, I secretly signaled the DJ and my father's girlfriend. While my dad was talking, the DJ prepared to play the video I had sent him. When my father presented the ring he was going to use to propose, the whole audience gasped. He thought they were shocked by the ring, but it was actually because of the video playing in the background. Everyone was horrified. At the end of the video, I made a little speech, telling them to check the special book in the gift bags. The party ended with Sue's parents yelling and screaming at her. I left without her and went back home. While we were at the party, I had Sue's belongings arranged outside the house and changed the locks and passcode so she couldn't get back in. I think she managed to get a ride home, because I heard her knocking on the door late at night. The next day, I sent her a long message making it clear that I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. I told her not to use the child as an excuse to stay in my life. I said that when the baby was born, she should have her lawyer contact mine so we could do a DNA test. Only the results would determine if I would ever talk to her again. I didn't bother texting my father. I blocked them on social media and changed my phone numbers. I even sold my house and bought an apartment in the city. I cut off all contact with them completely. Update. It's been 9 months since then, and Sue contacted me through my lawyer. The baby was 3 months old, and she wanted to do the DNA test. The results came in, and I am not the father of the baby, and neither is my father. I can finally remove her completely from my life. Story 2. Let me start from the beginning here. Yesterday, I had a meeting with my fiancé at our wedding venue to finalize some details, as we're getting married in 4 months. We drove there separately since she was coming straight from work. Towards the end of the meeting, she mentioned that her friend needed a ride home, and she asked if it would be okay. I didn't think much of it since I know her friend well, and it wasn't too far from our place. Once I got home, I tried to reach my fiancé for the next 3 hours, but she didn't answer. At around the 1:30 mark, I texted her friend to check if everything was all right. I was really worried. Finally, my fiancé came home and said sorry for taking so long. She hung out with her friend for a bit before heading back. I was okay with it but asked her to keep me informed next time. But then, her friend replied a few minutes later saying, "Sorry, I couldn't make it to the venue. I didn't see your fiancé tonight." I was confused and asked her why she would say that. She replied saying she didn't know and walked away. At this point, I was really suspicious and felt something was off. I've never done this before, but I checked her phone records. Yes, I did it and I don't regret it. I noticed that when she went outside, she called her friend who texted me right after she went out. I also saw a 1-hour call with a number I didn't recognize while she was on her way to the venue. I started asking her various questions about the rental place they went to, and other things. She answered quickly, and her explanations seemed legit. I thought, maybe I'm overthinking this, I should calm down and sleep on it. This morning, I asked her to show me the text from her friend asking her for a ride, and I said I would apologize for questioning her the night before. However, she refused to show me. Then I confronted her about the call I saw on her phone while we were driving to the venue, and she said it was the friend she picked up later. I knew right then she was lying because I had checked her phone records, and it didn't match. She then changed her story, saying she needed to meet a coworker named Michael to discuss a patient. I was confused and asked why they couldn't discuss it over the phone. I was getting really suspicious at this point since we've always been honest with each other. I asked her to show me the texts with Michael, but she refused. I questioned why she wouldn't show me if there was nothing to hide. I even asked if she was having an affair, or if she didn't want to be with me anymore. She paused for a moment, and then started listing all the things she thinks are wrong with me, like working too much, not spending enough time with her, and not listening. I was shocked at this point, because all of this was news to me. I started putting things together and realized something fishy was going on. I insisted on seeing the texts again, and after about half an hour of convincing, she finally showed them to me. They were crazy, filled with sexual content, and talking a lot of crap about me. It was clear that she wanted to be with him, and that they were basically in love. She just started this job 1.5 months ago, and he's her co-worker, much older and divorced with multiple kids. Meanwhile, I have been financially supporting her while she got back on her feet, and she was working extra hours to avoid getting a part-time job. We live together in our house with 3 dogs and a horse. I can't believe this is happening, especially since we were supposed to get married in 4 months. I'm feeling lost and don't know what to do. Any advice would be appreciated. Update. So I finally had a chance to talk with her tonight and sort things out. But, once again, she tried to put the blame on me for what she did. She justified her cheating and lying, saying it was because I didn't communicate well and didn't listen enough. According to her, if I had been a better listener, she wouldn't have started talking to that guy. She complained that I spent too much time in the office working and not enough time with her. I tried to explain that I was putting in extra hours at work to support her and the family financially while she was struggling, so she wouldn't have to get a part-time job. But she said she would rather have gotten a part-time job, which doesn't make sense to me at all. She thought since the whole thing was short-lived, just 1 week she claims, and they only made out once, we could move past it. But when I brought up the texts where she was talking trash about me and having sexual conversations with him, she changed the subject, and I got nowhere. I told her that I'm not the reason all this happened. She went too far without considering the consequences or talking to me about her feelings. I explained that I can never trust her again, and this mess is all because of her actions. It's her choice if she wants to try and blame me for all of this. Towards the end of our talk, things calmed down a bit. I told her, listen, we really need to figure out what to do about the house we own together and our 3 dogs. After some discussion, we reached 2 options. Either I stay and buy her out, or we sell the house and find new places. As for the dogs, we still need to decide who gets which one. That's where we left things tonight, and I'll keep you all updated on how things progress. I'm curious to know what you all would do about the house. I can handle the financial aspect alone, but it's a big place with nearly 3,000 square feet and 5 acres of land, mainly bought for her horse. She's taking the horse with her and boarding it at a barn when she leaves. Update. Day 3. I had a long 3-hour talk with her tonight. We discussed our relationship and what led to everything that happened. It started with her pointing out what I did wrong in our relationship. Lack of communication, spending too much time working and on my phone. I can't deny any of these points. My reason for working so much was to support the family. I run an e-commerce business on the side, and I'm the only one handling customer service, so deals happen around the clock. I'm always on the clock. I should have been better about putting my phone aside and responding to people the next day. The lack of communication was a two-way street, and a perfect example of that is the fact that I had no idea she was unhappy with any of this. She never communicated it to me. She said she felt I would have gotten upset if she told me, but she never gave me a chance to work on it. I know I'm not perfect, and many times I do or say things that she misinterprets as rude. For instance, a week or 2 ago, I was trying to help her with a budget to tackle her financial problems and set up a plan to get her back on track. Just to note, I work in finance and do this kind of stuff for clients all the time. She mentioned she owed me around $1,000 and said she'd pay me back on her next paycheck. But when we went through the transfers to our joint account, it turned out to be over $5,000. I didn't mean to make her feel bad. I just wanted her to realize how much I've been contributing. Unfortunately, she took it as me trying to humiliate her. Maybe my timing was off, but I was only trying to help and ensure our financial situation was okay. We still had a lot to pay for the wedding, and I was being cautious with budgeting to make sure we had enough. It really bothers me that she keeps justifying her actions by blaming my flaws. She tells me she's surprised that I would throw away 7 years of our relationship like this. I have to keep reminding her that I didn't throw it away. She did with her actions. She says I told too many people too quickly, and we could have resolved all of this between us. She also believes she wouldn't have talked to someone else if I was a better listener and communicator. I finally figured out the full extent of the affair, and based on the texts I read, I believe it started about 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure if they had met up outside of work before, but this time, he asked her to the park to play basketball and talk. They ended up making out, and while I'm pretty certain it didn't go further than that yet, I believe it would have in the near future. She insists he's not her boyfriend, and tonight she's gone off somewhere, and I'm guessing it's with him or a girlfriend. Living together is awkward right now, but I hope this gets resolved soon. I think she wants us to get back together and work things out. The main issue was a lack of communication that built up over time while we lived our boring, simple life. We never discussed this problem, and instead of talking to me, she acted out and spoke badly about me behind my back. She could be very sneaky, and I don't know if I can trust her completely again. The easiest thing would be to take her back, but I don't think I'd ever be truly happy doing that. Understanding the real cause has helped me feel better. It gives me a chance to work on my own flaws and communication issues and view things from a different perspective. Today, I hit the gym and plan to stick to a routine. I'm also going back to studying for my CFP designation. I took the week off work to focus on my mental health. I called the wedding venue and officially canceled the date. We got some money back, but we still lost a bit unless someone else takes the date. I updated her parents again to keep them in the loop. They live far away and are probably worried sick. I assure them that everything is calm and fine and they don't need to worry about their daughter. After some research, I found that with the current interest rates, I won't be able to find a comparable house for the same mortgage I'm paying now. Apartments are expensive too. So, I think it's best to try and buy out her share and have her find an apartment. She seems to be okay with it right now. We'll get an appraiser to assess the value and figure out if I can manage half of the equity. Update. It's been almost a month since this whole situation went down, and I want to give you all an update. It's been a whirlwind of emotions and events. I'll be honest, in the few days after it happened, I was a mess, trying to get back with that cheating jerk. It's embarrassing to admit, but it's all part of the process of moving on. In that vulnerable state, I tried everything to make things right and better, but nothing worked. She told me she had to choose between me and him, and she chose him. That's when I finally woke up and realized I had let my self-worth plummet. I needed to step back and focus on myself and what's best for me. It's tough after 7 years of putting someone else first, but that's exactly what I've been doing since. I moved our joint savings to my own checking account. I figured out what was owed to me and transferred half of the balance back to the joint account for her to take. I've been hitting the gym every day since this happened. It not only improves how I look, but it helps me think clearly too. I've been doing some fun stuff lately, like shopping for suits, getting massages, and hanging out with friends and family. Looking back, I realized this relationship was isolating me from the people who care about me, which should have been a major warning sign. I never really did anything for myself. It was always about providing for my partner and our pets. But now, I'm changing that. I started seeing a therapist for the first time, and it's been helpful to talk things out and make decisions. I might even continue therapy after this situation is resolved to keep improving myself. As for the living situation, I'm still in the same house with my ex. She's sleeping in the guest bedroom, and we only communicate about practical stuff like feeding the dogs. I think she's a terrible person, and no matter what I say, she blames me for everything. It's ridiculous because she accused me of being a bad communicator, but then she couldn't communicate her feelings and ended up cheating. It's like she's living in her own delusional world. I've given up trying to reason with her because it's pointless. I've been keeping things moving by putting the house up for sale. I reached out to an agent, and after hearing their proposed sale price, my ex asked me to contact 2 other agents for their opinions. It wasn't fair, but I went ahead and set up all the appointments and met with them. Eventually, we chose the first agent we talked to. We got the pictures taken on Sunday and listed the house for sale that same night. The open house is set for next Saturday, and we're already getting a lot of attention on the real estate websites. My ex will be taking the horse to a barn, though we haven't decided where yet. As for the dogs, I offered to take 1 or none, but she wants to keep all 3 together, which is fine with me. It allows me to have a fresh start. Surprisingly, about a week ago, I met someone new, and we've been spending a lot of time together. I'm not expecting anything serious, but it's nice to have her company. She's been really supportive since she's been through a similar situation in the past. Talking to a kind, thoughtful, and independent woman has been a real eye-opener for me. It made me realize how much of a narcissist my ex was, so self-centered, manipulative, and dependent. I wish I had listened to the warnings from my family and friends much earlier. I got caught up in a simple routine, not really enjoying life, but just going with the flow because it was comfortable. We had a nice house, lots of land, and great pets,